A long time ago, I did a how to paint salamanders tutorial, and it was quite long and involved and would take you a while if you were painting an army. So more recently, I did a how to paint salamanders quick video, which looked really good, super effective, but actually wouldn't really work very well with tanks. So I thought, what is the ultimate way to paint salamanders that gets you the good looking result but also doesn't take forever? Behold. I needed a secret weapon, and the secret weapon is this Salamander Green spray from Colourforge, which is an exact match to the Warp Lightning paint by Citadel. Now, I'm going to caveat this to say that this isn't available outside of the UK at the moment. I've spoken to Colourforge about this. They're really hopeful to get some distributors in North America soon. So hopefully you'll be able to get hold of it in the rest of the world at some point in the future. Now, before I did this video, I did have a think about what alternatives you can use, and there is an orc skin spray by Army Painter, which is a little darker, but will do the job. Otherwise, if you have an airbrush, you can just use the Warp Lightning from Citadel, and that'll work perfectly fine as well. So let's get into the painting. Now, there's quite a few black elements on the salamanders, so I took some AK black and used this to paint them all in. So you've got the shoulder pad inserts, you've also got the backpacks. You, of course, have all the soft ribbing between the armour panels, and you have the weapon casing. Now, I'm painting these Infernus Marines, so some of the steps will be relevant to these Marines specifically, and some of them won't be because you won't necessarily have these weapons, so just bear that in mind as we go through the video. Next up, we'll paint all of the silver elements. Now, the colour I've chosen to use here is Surcoat Silver from the Two Thin Coats range. I'm really liking their metallics at the moment. They're really, really good, and they cover well in just one coat. So I'm working my way around all the silver parts with this. If you haven't got Surcoat Silver, you can use something like dark aluminium from Vallejo, or if you've got the Citadel equivalent, Leadbelcher is perfectly fine as well. Just take your time around the areas you may have already finished, especially when you're working across the armour, because the less mistakes we make now, the less we have to clean up later on. Now, I'm going to paint the muzzle on these Infernus Marines with some Balthazar Gold. Now, you may not have these on the Marines you're painting, and that's absolutely fine. You can skip this step and move forward to the next one. I'm also going to paint the brazier on the Squad Sergeant. Again, this is from the Salamander upgrade pack that you can get. So I think it's a nice little element there to just differentiate these from any other Marines that you may have. I'm keeping the paint fairly thin. It does cover in one coat, but we just want to make sure we get it into all the little nooks and crannies. I'm now going to paint all the leather with Dryad Bark, and that's because I wanted a brown leather just to differentiate it a bit from all the other black elements on the model. Now, if you look at some of the box art, the salamander leather is black. So if you want to do it black, that's absolutely fine. You can just follow the steps that I use when painting the black in a little bit. You may also notice that I haven't shaded any of the metallics yet, and that's for good reason. Once I've got this leather finished, I'm going to shade it all together with the same colour. The colour I'm going to use to shade these models is Null Oil. And what I'm going to make sure that I do is that it gets into all those really deep recesses, and particularly into some of the holes of that muzzle as well, just to make sure that you get that nice dark colour. I'm also going to paint all of the leather and let it settle into the recesses. One of the things I make sure of with the Nuln Oil that it doesn't pool too much and it doesn't go and spill all over the green armour either, because I really want to make sure that this is nice and neat. While we're waiting for that to dry, let's have a look at this week's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. Now it's autumn or fall if you're in the US, the leaves are changing and the nights are closing in. So what better time to get comfortable and start playing a great game? Raid are currently giving away a fantastic legendary character, Sun Wukong, also known as the Monkey King. Now, Raid Shadow Legends is a completely free-to-play mobile game available on iOS and Android. It's got amazing graphics and over 800 completely unique champions. You can browse the champions index to get some great colour scheme ideas. Are you maybe painting some undead? Or maybe you've got some fierce orcs that you need to paint up. Maybe your tastes are a little more sacred and the Sacred Order is more up your street. Now, Sun Wukong is a phenomenally powerful character that can block butts from your enemies. This means he can depower them and make their attacks much less effective. Sun Wukong can also depower your enemies by polymorphing them into something a bit more fluffy and a lot less harmful. Finally, he can self-revive and passively heal himself every turn, which means he is never out of the fight for long. Now, whilst getting Sun Wukong is a great incentive, if you use my exclusive link in the description or scan my QR code, you can get not one but 2 additional epic champions. Lightsworn is a powerful healer that keeps your team alive and can even revive a teammate on death. Once you hit level 15, you'll also get access to Juliana, an epic champion and boss killer that has mountains of attack stats. Once you download the game with my link, use the promo code MonkeyKing to get your third champion, Sun Wukong, for free. This promo code will only work for 72 hours from when this video goes live, so please move fast. So hit the link in the description or scan my QR code and I'll see you on the battlefield. So with the Nuln Oil completely dry, let's start highlighting. The first colour I'm going to use on the leather is Gorthor Brown, which is a nice desaturated brown. It's quite a bit lighter than the colour we've got on the model. What I'm looking to do is use this to catch all the raised edges of the leather pouches and the belts. So make sure you haven't got too much on your brush, you've got a good point, and then you can very simply just drag it along those sharp edges to get a really nice highlight on the leather. While I've got the Gorthor Brown out, I'm also going to base all of the purity seals, because that's going to make it a lot easier and quicker to paint those later on as well. To highlight the silver, I'm using the old classic chrome from Vallejo Model Air. Now you can use any bright silver, so if you've got something like Stormhost Silver from Citadel, that'll be fine as well. And what I'm looking to do is just catch the sharp edges that are going to catch the most light. So make sure you haven't got too much on your brush and you have got a good tip on there. And all I'm going to do is just drag it along those areas and you'll see a very nice, crisp, bright silver highlight. To highlight all of the brassy areas, I'm using Sycorax Bronze. Now you can see I'm using a slightly different brush here, and that's for very good reason, in that I'm just going to pull it across the top of the barrel because that gives me a nice broad highlight where the light's going to catch. But also because it's not quite a chisel tip, but it's got that effect. It's really easy to pull it along the edges and get some nice sharp highlights along there as well. And again, if you put too much on, you can also go back in with some Balthazar Gold to correct it. To highlight the brazier, I'm back to my normal brush, and this is again just a case of catching those sharp edges. To paint the main gold elements, we're going to use some Dragon's Gold from 2 thin coats. If you don't have this, something like Retributor Armour is absolutely fine. The colours are pretty much identical. I just think the Dragon's Gold's got a little bit better coverage. So I'm painting this over the chest eagle. There's also a little bit of detailing on some of the fuel canisters, and the sergeant's also got a bullet charm or a shell casing charm on the handle of his bolt pistol as well. Shading this is really easy by taking some Reikland Fleshshade. Now, like before, you don't want to flood the area too much, you just want to get it into the recesses, so make sure you haven't got too much on your brush. We'll highlight the gold using Glistening Gold, again from 2 thin coats. I think this is a really, really nice paint for highlighting gold, and you can see it really does add a nice shine. If you haven't got this, Liberator Gold from Citadel is again absolutely fine for this highlight stage. So we'll do all of the purity seals now because it's a good time before we get into the nitty-gritty of the armour. So the first thing we're going to do is take some Rakarth Flesh. Now I'm going to use this to paint, first of all, the wax seal element, and then I'm going to use it to paint the parchment paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the Gorthor Brown in the deepest recesses, and I'm going to move the Rakarth Flesh across the model, catching the sharp edges and also those folds that are going to catch the most light. We can then highlight these with Pallid Wych Flesh. So again, I'm highlighting the wax of the seal with the Pallid Wych Flesh and also the parchment paper, where I'm pulling it down the sharp edges to get a nice crisp highlight, but also then just moving it along the edges where you've got those folds that are facing upwards that are going to catch quite a bit of light. And this gives you a nice paper effect without too much effort. To paint the wax of the purity seal, I'm going to take some Flesh Terror's red contrast paint, and this is where the layers of Rakarth Flesh and Pallid Wych Flesh will really help, because what we'll do is we'll get a nice deep red in the recesses and something slightly lighter along the edges, which will give you a nice effect on the tabletop. I'm happy with this. If you want to highlight it, you can. Let's highlight the black. Now, there is quite a lot of black on the model, so the first colour we're going to use is Mechanicus Standard Grey. Now, where we've got some sharp edges, such as along the weapon, the backpack, not so much the shoulder inserts, we're just going to make sure we've got a little bit on the brush, and we're going to move the brush along the edge, barely touching it. And this is going to give us a nice, sharp, crisp highlight. Now, in this step, I would say less is more, because if you do go quite overboard and highlight every edge, then the black will tend to be a bit grey looking. So, like I said, take your time, less is more. You can always add more in later on. To finish the black highlight, we're going to take some Administratum Grey. Now, this is a much brighter grey colour, so it's going to be quite stark until it dries and blends in a little bit. In terms of the areas we're going to focus on, they're the sharp edges and corners that are going to catch the most light. And again, we're going to make sure we haven't got too much on our brush, and we're just going to tap it along those edges. And that's going to give us that nice crisp highlight. Ultimately, we want to make sure we're painting this inside the Mechanicus Grey from the last stage. To shade the model, we're going to use a black oil wash, and I'm using Ivory black oil from Winsor & Newton. To make an oil wash, very simple. Take a little bit of oil, pop it in a metal palette cup like this, then add some odourless white spirit or some odourless oil thinner such as Sansador and mix it up into a wash. You can then apply this to the miniature, and I'm going to focus on only the recesses, and the reason I'm going to do that is because it means there's much less cleanup afterwards. Now, in terms of cleanup, you can use a makeup sponge, you can use the brush that's damp in white spirit, but because I'm going to be very careful, I'm hopefully not going to have much to do. Now, I often get questions about varnishing the model before using an oil wash. I don't, because I've never had a problem with it taking off the paint. If you are worried about this, or you want a smoother surface to help the paint flow better, then by all means put a coat of varnish down, and then once it's completely dry, you can varnish over it, and you can go from there. With all those elements done, let's highlight the armour. Now, if you need to, go back in with Warp Lightning and paint over any mistakes you've made. I had a few, particularly around with the gold areas. The first highlight we're going to do is Moot Green, which is a nice, bright, lime, yellowy green colour. And we're going to do this exactly the same way we've done all the other highlighting. Is we're going to look at catching the edges of the armour, making sure we haven't got too much on our brush, and just pulling it along those sharp edges to get a nice crisp highlight. Where we can't do this, such as where we're working on the inside of the leg, or we're working on the arm, for instance, we just want to be very careful and just make short, sharp movements to get those highlights in. If you do make any mistakes, it's really easy to cover up using some Warp Lightning. The final highlight on the armour is going to be a mix 50-50 Moot Green and Dawn Yellow. Now, this can be quite overpowering and it can push the model to the yellow, so we want to keep it as sparingly as possible, and we're only really going to use it on the absolute sharpest edges, such as the corner of shoulder pads, the front of the gorget, the top of the helmet, the sharp edges of the knees, etc. And again, this is very much a case of less is more. If you do put too much on, again, easily correctable with either Moot Green or Warp Lightning. The last thing we need to do on the Salamander Marines is paint the eyes, and thanks to contrast paints, this is really easy. The first thing we need to do is paint the actual eye lenses using some white paint. I like bold titanium white from Pro Acryl. When that's dry, take some Bad Moon Yellow contrast paint and just drop it over the white that you've just painted. And straight away, you'll get a very simple, really simple, glowing yellow eye lens. So there we have it. This Salamander squad is done and ready for the tabletop. I'm really happy with how it turned out. And now you may be wondering how to paint the flame on the Sergeant's backpack. Well, check out this video here. Don't forget to use my Raid Shadow Legends link in the description or scan my QR code to get insane bonuses for new players, including 2 epic champions and of course, Sun Wukong. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.